What is physics about? And I claim physics is the science of existence. Physics has exclusive control or possession of the word exist. Anyone who talks about existence of anything, you can talk about unicorns, you can talk about, leprechauns, whatever you want to talk about, doesn't matter. The chair, the tree, the dog, the rock, you step the boundary over into physics. Physics is the science of existence. Physics only tries to explain that which happened, and that which happened with objects that exist, right? Anyways, that's my definition. But what do we have? There was an article that was, I guess, commissioned, you can say, or there were funds allocated to figuring out what physics is about. And the Institute of Physics, IOP, right? Probably the #1 institution of physics on the planet, commissioned this study, or I guess set it in motion, put the funds, and they researched it for 4 years. They consulted everyone on planet Earth that was somebody, people from different disciplines, and this is what they came up with. I'll go over some of the conclusions of what physics is officially. Okay, so now that you are going to read this, you're going to figure out what physics is from the official point of view, right? Here it is. And what happened was they went in there and they said, look, what questions do these people ask? What does a physicist do? They ask all these kinds of questions. And it says physicists focus their thinking on developing insight into what the observable world is made of. Observable? So that means physics is going to be a subjective discipline. It's just going to look at what we observe. Not the things we don't observe, like we can't observe a magnetic field, whatever observe means. I mean, are they talking about eyesight here? Are they talking about running a test, touching, detecting? Are they going to smell it? Are they going to taste it? What does observable mean? And then it continues, and how its constituents behave. Okay, no problem there. Trying their hardest to achieve a deep understanding. Okay, what is it that they're really trying to do? Physicists seek the most fundamental explanations that have utility and currency across many domains. Now, utility, we're not interested. Utility is technology. They are not satisfied with superficial explanations. Well, hold it. We have not only superficial, but we have irrational explanations. What is relativity? What is quantum? I mean, when a particle can be at two places at once, is that superficial? Is that rational? I mean, what is that? This involves systematic criticisms of every idea and result. They have to bring to bear a wide range of knowledge, the big word knowledge there. Again, cognizance, it talks about what you can perceive, what you think you know. And what you know is not what I know, and what is truth to you is a lie to me. So what does knowledge mean? Do we introduce knowledge into science? To make sure each analysis is consistent with what is already known. Again, known, know, knowledge. Those words are, 4-letter words in science. We don't use them. They are forced to be very creative, always looking for new answers or new approaches. All this thinking is informed by experiment. So how do you experiment on an invisible, intangible entity like gravity? Is that why we don't have any idea what gravity is? Because we rely on experiment, observation, and measurement, which is what they propose there. Carefully and cleverly designed. Okay, physicists aim for that sharper, deeper, quantitative understanding. Quantitative? What's quantitative got to do with science? Based on mathematical models. You can see how this all developed. It developed from math, which they use and reuse in order to make predictions. I thought astrologers made predictions. I didn't know that scientists made predictions that work universally. And again, work, what do they mean by work? Are they talking about, philosophy here? Are they talking about technology maybe? Is that what work means? So these people, you can see, it's all subjective. They're talking about what we know, what we can experiment on or determine through experiment. Is that what science is about? Observation? Do we observe gravity? Can we test gravity? I mean, we can measure gravity and tell you, yeah, you fall to the center of the earth at 9.8 meters per second square. That's a description. You measured 1,000,000,000 times, you came up with that number, now you have a precise number, whatever number of decimals that is, okay? Great. So you have a perfect mathematical description, measurement of gravity. What does that tell you about the cause of gravity, the mechanism Mother Nature uses to pull you down to the center of the earth? Is she pushing you with particles? Is she dragging you with ropes? How is she pulling or pushing on you? That's what we want to know. That's the point of science, of physics, trying to figure out how the invisible universe works. You know, we all understand the visible universe. You pull on a rope and the bucket goes up through the pulley. And we say, okay, we understood the whole thing just by watching. Now do that with gravity. How are you going to explain gravity now? Do you need math for that? Do you need an equation for that? Do you need numbers, measurement, any of that? So this is the issue. Okay, so because of that, you know, they ended up with this notion here that says questions physicists and other scientists are attempting to answer. Okay, what exists? Interesting, because they ended up with the same thing that I'm proposing. Physics is the science of existence. Yeah, what exists? And when we say what exists, we know the visible stuff, the tangible stuff. That's easy. That's a piece of cake. We take it for granted. You know, we touch the table and say, well, the table exists, right? Does gravity exist? How are you going to determine that if you can't see or touch it or test it in any way through an experiment? That's the question that we have before. That's why today, after 10,000 years, they can't give you a rational explanation for stuff like magnetism or electricity or gravity, right? Why do things happen? If we're talking about causes, mechanisms, that's a valid question. So those two first ones are okay. I have no problem with them. But then we say, how do we come to know? Now we introduce the observer. now they're changing the subject. Now they're saying, you know, here we're going to rely on your senses, right? What you can sense, what you can perceive. And I want to emphasize those words because you're going to see that Ayn Rand is right in there. She talks about what we sense, what we perceive. And that makes it very subjective and not at all objective, okay? What can we do with knowledge? Well, we can throw it away. We have no use for knowledge, okay? So, yeah, knowledge is a big problem also. People think they know. I mean, do we know that God exists? Do you know that God exists? Well, how are you going to prove it? And yeah, we've been trying to prove it for now, thousands of years? Okay. Okay, let me go here. Article continues here with another point, and you can see here how it becomes very subjective. Characteristics of physics explanation. Physics aims to provide the most fundamental explanations possible in terms of constituents of the universe and how they behave. Okay, I've got no problem with that. That's good. But see, the word is explanation. See, and we're going to find out real quick that science or physics, mathematical physics, is not at all about explanations. It's about descriptions. That's what they think science is. But see, they use the word explanation in this report to the IOP, the people who worked on this project, right? The cycle of developing a physics explanation. Again, explanation. Physics explanations are durable and reliable. Okay, man, it's good to know that. You know, a particle can be at two places at the same time. That's a good explanation. I guess it's very reliable, right? Because of the way in which they have been developed and severely tested. How do you test that a particle can be at two places at once? Okay? And I'm using an extreme example, and I harp on that because it shows an extreme example of how irrational mathematical physics has become. Physics is an empirical discipline. Empirical. We empiricize this. In other words, you got to go to the lab and do an experiment and do some hands-on, and physics becomes an empirical thing, whatever. Okay? A phenomenon, experimental measurements. Again, measurement. What does measurement have to do with physics? I'm trying to get an explanation. They were talking about explanations there. So if they're talking about explanation, what does measurement have to do with explanation? Measurement is a description. That's what all of mathematics is. An equation is only a description of motion, specifically. Thinking and reasoning. Physics explanations are developed from data. From data? Okay. Using reason and logic, okay, whatever that is, and refined by argument and critique. In other words, there's discussion. That's interesting because I try to publish a paper in Nature. I try to publish another paper in Science magazine, and they sent me a very polite reply saying that they have very little editorial space for my stuff, that I should go and visit the philosophy group because they don't consider what I do physics. And you go to the philosophy group and they say, well, it's out of topic. I sent them also to philosophy group, questions of issue. When I dealt with the issue of object and exist, they had no idea what I was talking about. They don't know what an object is. And here you go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and they go in circles forever on what an object and what existence is. They still don't know. They have meetings every year. They have conferences every year. And they're still trying to figure out what an object is, what a thing is, and what existence means. But they won't accept, what I'm proposing, which is concise, rational, consistent use, They don't accept that. So yeah, we have all these problems, and the question is whether that's an issue of philosophy or an issue of physics, right? Physics explanations are developed from data, okay. Using reason and logic, okay. Modeling. Many explanations are based on models with which to think and to make prediction. Predictions? What does predictions have to do with science? See, what has happened is these people say, look, I can predict there's going to be an eclipse tomorrow, okay, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so they have this power of prediction, and people say, oh, look, these people can predict, so that means they're doing science. They're really, if they can predict the future, what's going to happen, obviously they know something, right? And so that's how, prediction enters the realm of physics. Why? Because, if the car is traveling at 50 miles per hour, and if there's no other influence, any accident or anything, well, you can predict that in 1 hour it'll be 50 miles away. And in that sense, mathematics says, oh, we can predict. See, we can predict that the Earth is going to go around the sun and be back here in a year. And we're going to have winter, summer, and so on down the line. Why? Because mathematics uses, once you measure something, you can use it to predict. How fast is my pen going to fall to the floor? 9.8 meters per second squared. We know it. And why do we know it? Well, because we measured it 1 billion times, so we created these numbers, these measurements, and now we can predict. And that's how prediction entered science. But I still don't know how the pen fell to the floor. Oh, that's philosophy. That's the runaround that you get, okay? Mathematical formulation. Some models result in power mathematical relationships between quantities. Yeah, they had to put all these quantities and math and prediction because this is what mathematicians do, okay? They are the ones who are using all this stuff, and they turn science into, a measurement and prediction and numbers game. That's why they introduced all these terms. We don't use any of those in physics, because in physics we're trying to explain mechanisms. And measurement has no relation whatsoever to mechanisms. If it helps you infer, deduce what gravity does, fine, that's great. That's more power to you. But saying that measurement, a meter per second, whatever that is, for whatever motion that is, that's an explanation. That's where we have a problem. Okay? And here we have, just in case, because you're going to say, well, Bill, that's your opinion. Let's get some authority behind these concepts so that you don't blame it all on me, okay? Here's Mr. Simonek, and he's a professor. I think he's retired now. He's an emeritus professor at and he says, science doesn't explain, science describes. So you describe a chair, it's got a backrest, a seat, 4 legs, and you did science. You can measure the legs if you want to know, they're 1 meter high, they're great. And then you're doing science. That's according to Mr. Simonek. He thinks that science is all about just measuring, okay? And that's what it's become. Here we have, just in case, more authority, more, important things behind there so that you can see where all these people are coming from. And he says, you and I evolved in a world of 3 dimensions. We can't visualize more dimensions. I can visualize 3 dimensions in my head, but I use X, Y, and Z to describe them mathematically. Now I go to 4 dimensions or 5 dimensions. I can't visualize them anymore. I can't say, now close your eyes and view in your head 5 dimensions, because I can't do it either. So we're stuck needing mathematics because evolution didn't equip us to be able to visualize quantum mechanics. It didn't equip us to visualize 11-dimensional spacetimes. Evolution did this to us. I love that statement, So they have no explanations, and they say, look, all we can do is describe, and we cannot even imagine the world that we're talking about, the theories we are proposing, because, they're 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, 26 dimensionals. And we're not equipped by nature. Mother Nature did this to us. She made us only 3-dimensional beings, and so 4-dimensional whatevers are outside, are beyond our comprehension. You can only do it mathematically. You can do it with X, Y, Z, W's, ABCs, all the letters in the alphabet if you want. There's 26, so you got to have 26 dimensions, right? But you can't physically reproduce it here in 3 dimensions because we are stuck in 3-dimensional world, and our universe is obviously anywhere from 4 to 26 dimensions or more. I don't know if they're coming up with more of them. And just in case, we have Mr. Weinberg also here, and he said in one of his shows, I don't think mathematics can ever be regarded as an explanation in itself for anything, and this has not always been well understood. See, the question is whether we're interested in explanation. Is physics about explaining or not? And that's a decision you have to reach on your own. Nobody can do it for you. You can't say, well, let me look it up in the dictionary. No. You got to figure out, are you interested in having an explanation of a mechanism of how gravity works, of how light works, how magnetism works, how electricity works, how the atom works? If you're interested in those kinds of issues, you can't do it with math, because math only describes. Here you have the gurus telling you, if you're looking for an explanation, you won't find it. You'll find descriptions, mathematical descriptions. So that's a decision you have to take on your own. No one can take it for you. No one can think for you. No one can love for you. Okay? No one can feel pain for you. Okay? What is physics in the alternative? Well, not in the alternative. I'll give my alternative. But here, this is what these people concluded. This is what physics means or is to them. Physics is the science of matter and its motion. The science that deals with concepts such as force, energy, and mass. Is that what physics deals with? All these are mathematical concepts. Can you explain anything with force, with energy, with mass? I'm going to be dealing with that today in JF's program, the public space. But mass, just think about it for a second. You got this enormous mass, this unimaginably infinite mass. We call it a black hole. That's what a black hole is, just infinite mass, 0 volume. And okay, that's a mathematical concept, that's an equation. Tell me how, by what mechanism, mass compels a star to go around that little dot, that inexistent volume. Because that's what they're saying. They're saying, look, how do we detect a black hole? Well, the way we detect it is very simple. We see that a star is rolling around nothing, orbiting nothing, very fast. Oh, there's got to be a mass in the center of that orbit. So the star is just orbiting a mass. Okay, let's concede. I'll concede. Please tell me how mass, kilograms, How does kilograms do it? How does kilograms compel the star to go around? See, we can do that with math. We can say, use Newton's equation to go simple. Mass divided by distance square, and then you can explain more or less, a black hole. You can say, okay, not explain, but describe. You can say, okay, if there's an object such as a star around a gazillion kilograms, it would go at this speed. So you got a description. You can calculate all that. That's fine. So far, so good. No problem. Now the question is, how does those kilograms, how does that mass do it? That's what we want to know. And that's where they run into trouble. That's where you won't find a mathematician. That's when they'll give you some warped space explanation, physical interpretation. That's where we have a problem, in the physical interpretation. The study of matter, energy, and the interaction between them. Interaction between energy and matter? What is energy? Can you please draw it for me? Can you make a little picture of energy so I know what you're talking about? Okay, but what that really means is that physics is about asking fundamental questions and trying to answer them by observing and experimenting. How can you observe and experiment a magnetic field, or even worse, gravity? What are you observing? What are you experimenting with? This is something you got to fall back and do some armchair physics. You got to drink a beer. You got to have a beer in your hand. You can't do it without a beer. Okay, that's important. You got to think. You got to visualize. You're not going to figure it out by going to the lab and saying, okay, let me drop a pen 1,000,000 times and figure out what the mechanism of gravity is. You can do it until you kill yourself. You can drop the pen all the time. Are you going to figure out how gravity works just by dropping the pen, by going to the lab and performing repeatable experiments forever, and measuring and saying it falls at this speed, at this acceleration? Is that how you're going to figure out what gravity is and how Mother Nature does gravity? See, these are the questions you got to answer, okay? This is where the problem is. The problem is in the explanations of the mechanisms. And that's what we claim physics is about. Math is something else. Math is, measuring, calculating, getting equations, describing. That's what math is. Physics, explanations. Explanations of what? Of qualitative, not quantitative, qualitative phenomena, of mechanisms. You got to explain how Mother Nature does this invisible trick. And the only way you're going to figure it out is by laying back and visualizing. And specifically, what I mean by that, it means that you have to make visible her invisible mediators. You have to make visible her intangible mediators. You got to make it visible. Then you can understand the mechanism. That's what physics is about. Okay, so we don't know what exist means. We don't know what physics is. Do we know what philosophy is? Because Ayn Rand did philosophy, okay? And you go in there and you look at philosophy to see, because again, we need to define these terms if we're going to use the word philosophy in any sensible way, if we're on the same page. Philosophy, this is the one you're going to find out there. Essentially, people copy this, all right? This was from one of the visitors. It says, the explanation of the fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, values, reasons, mind, and art. And yeah, we have a problem because, again, it's a jack of all trades. We're saying we're covering every base. Philosophy is everything. It's thinking, it's making assumptions, it's reasoning, it's conclusions, it's existence, it's the whole works. So what is philosophy? That's like saying God is everything. Well, God is everything, God is nothing. I mean, what can you say with the word God if God's going to be everything? And if philosophy is going to mean everything that you can think of, then what is philosophy? What's the purpose of philosophy? Okay. And here one person tried to answer that question. Says, philosophy, Bill does not understand the purpose of philosophy. The purpose of philosophy is to ground ethics. Well, I thought ethics was something related to good and bad, right or wrong. I thought that was opinion. Ethics, justice, good, bad. Does a lion, when he kills, an animal out there, a deer or a zebra, is that ethical? Is it ethical for the tourist who's taking a picture to not intervene and save that poor animal from its death? Or is it more ethical to say, well, the lion has to eat? Mother Nature's law will allow them to, we're not going to intervene. So what's ethical? You know, ethical is just an opinion. It's always been an opinion. Ethics belongs to religion. All religion is just opinion. Okay? So, yeah, here you have the definition from the Wikipedia, and you can see they're all in the same, essentially the same line. It says the study of general and fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, values, reasons, mind. Again, they include everything in there. And so you never know what philosophy is, because philosophy is everything. Nobody has defined it in a concise manner that you can use consistently, rationally, scientifically. Okay? Okay? Here's another instance of that. Physics is not philosophy, but your approach to physics is highly philosophical. Well, you can't say that until you define what physics is and what philosophy is. So what we do in rational science is, look, if there's a crucial word, a strategic word, and you cannot define it, you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to use it until you define it. You got to tell me what philosophy is before you can say anything, before you can use it in a sentence. I think that's a fair way of dealing. You know, if I don't know what you mean by philosophy, you just said X. You just replace philosophy or philosophical with a letter X, and that's as much as we understood, because you haven't defined the term. Please tell us what philosophy is. And yeah, I do define it, and many people don't like my definition, because they say that it's got nothing to do with what philosophy has meant or been for the last 2,500 years. No kidding. I'm telling you, there's a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift says that physics is rational explanations of mechanisms, and philosophy is rational explanations of behavior. One deals with man and how he behaves. The other one deals with objects, inert objects typically, right? And how they behaved, how they moved. Okay? Both of them are rational explanations, therefore they fall under science, which the definition of is rational explanations. Now we have a consistent use of the word philosophy and of the word physics. Okay? That's the way I think it should be treated. Okay? Anyways, I'm going to be criticizing Ayn Rand's definitions under my definition of philosophy. And that definition is that objective, it's just rational explanations of behaviors. And if you have a different definition, well, the onus is on you to put it forward. You have to define the term, then you can talk about, what it means. But you got to defend it. You got to get inside the ring and defend your definition before you use the term. You have to allow that, criticism, people to try to destroy it. And certainly you can't use anything out there, that's out there today. So all you got to do is just think very deeply and come up with a good definition of the word philosophy. Otherwise, you don't have a case. You're just going to be doing religion, especially if you're going to turn the word philosophy as something subjective. And that's what Ayn Rand did.